Everyone had heard of Princess Damayanti. She was known throughout India as a beautiful, kind, and generous princess. She was kind to all around her, even the animals. She once found a swan with an arrow in its wing, and she bandaged it and cared for it until it was well enough to fly away. And when the swan flew back to its home, it met Prince Nal. Now, Prince Nal was also known as being kind and generous and handsome in the land. And as he saw this wounded swan, he crept closely and spoke to it and asked what happened. The swan told him about his troubles and about the gentle care of Princess Damayanti. Prince Nal was so moved by the kindness of the princess that he asked the swan to carry a message for him. The swan agreed, and he flew back to Princess Damayanti, who read the message, which made her smile and blush a little, and she sent another message back. And time passed, and through this swan, their friend, Princess Damayanti and Prince Nal grew to know each other through letters, and without ever seeing one another, fell in love. Time passed, and Princess Damayanti's parents decided it was time for her to get married. The tradition at the time was for the princess to hold a large party where she would choose who she was to marry. And as soon as her parents told her it was time for her to marry, she sent a message to Prince Nal through her swan, begging him to come so she could choose him. The swan carried the message and flew bravely across the country, but on the way was caught up in a strong wind which blew him back and forth until he had almost no strength left, and he let go of the message. He flew down to Prince Nal and told him what happened, and Prince Nal was so excited he immediately prepared for the journey to see Princess Damayanti. Now, you might be wondering what happened to the message the swan carried. Well, in those winds were the 4 gods of the winds arguing and fighting over who was the strongest. And one of them grabbed the note before it flew away forever and read it out loud. And all 4 brothers exclaimed, "Princess Damayanti!" For you see, she was so kind and generous that even the gods knew her reputation. The 4 winds immediately started arguing about which one of them she would choose if they were to show up. So, they decided after all that arguing to go and see who she would choose. So they flew down to the earth, and they were in such a great hurry that they didn't even see a man on the road, and they blew him down. The gods stood up from where they had tumbled and picked up the man and good-naturedly slapped him on the back and said, "Oh, we're so sorry. We were just excited." And they went on and on. They were in such a good mood. They asked the man where he was going, and he said, "Oh, I'm Prince Nal, and I am heading to Princess Damayanti's palace or she is going to have a choosing. And the four winds laughed, and it almost blew Prince Nal over again. And they said, well, that is where we're going too. Oh, we're sorry. It's bad luck, for we know Princess Damayanti will choose one of us. For who would decide to marry a mere mortal and disappoint a god? And then their laughter turned a little bit to rumbling, like a storm cloud. Prince Nal was so afraid for Princess Damayanti. He knew that the winds had a reputation for being, well, a bit hard to control. Who knew what they would do if she chose someone else? So Prince Nal threw himself to the ground and said, please, please have mercy on Princess Damayanti. You see, she and I are already in love, and she has promised that she will choose me. The four winds huddled together and grumbled a bit some more. And then their breezes gentled, and they turned and they said, we will honor whoever she chooses, but we think she'll choose one of us. So off went the winds, roaring over Prince Nal's head to the palace. And slowly and nervously, Prince Nal followed. Now, at Princess Damayanti's palace, everything was prepared for the choosing. There were feasts prepared and extra rooms for princes and kings from all over India had come to try and convince Princess Damayanti to marry them. But Princess Damayanti just simply smiled and nodded and chatted with everyone as they arrived, looking eagerly, hoping to see Prince Nal. And soon she did. In he came, looking a little nervous and a little worried. But as soon as he saw Princess Damayanti, he broke into a giant smile. And even though they had never met before, Princess Damayanti knew that this was her beloved. But then she was very confused, because coming behind Prince Nal were four identical princes. You see, the four winds had chosen for a disguise to look exactly like Prince Nal. And as the choosing ceremony began, everyone was so mixed up and there was so much rushing around and moving that Princess Damayanti lost track of which was the real Prince Nal. So the moment arrived. She had in her hands a special wreath of flowers that she had made. And when she found the man she chose to be her husband, she was to put it around his neck. She quickly passed by all the other people and went to the group of 5 identical Prince Nals. She was so nervous and so worried, but she thought to herself, if I just pay attention and use my wits, I'll find a way to find my true Prince Nal. So she stopped and looked at the first prince. He looked just like the others, but after a while of staring at him, she noticed he never blinked. Well, that was surely not Prince Nal, so she went to the next. She stared and stared and watched, and after a while she noticed that this prince never took a breath. Well, surely that was not Prince Nal. So she went to the next, and she noticed very quickly that he was slightly taller than the others. She looked down on the ground and saw that he was hovering ever so slightly off of the ground. Well, that was clearly not Prince Nal. So she went to the next, and by this time, it was getting very hot. It was the middle of the day, and the sun was beating down. And as she stared and stared at this fourth Prince Nal, she realized something. He was as crisp and dry as the moment he arrived, unlike Princess Damayanti, who was starting to sweat through her clothes. Well, this was another false Prince Nal. So she stepped to the last prince, and there he was, eyes blinking against the sun, breath coming heavy and hard from worry and nervousness, feet firmly planted on the ground, and hair and clothes damp with sweat. Even though he looked quite a mess, she threw the wreath over his head and gave him a huge hug and said, "I choose you, my darling Prince Nal." Everyone kind of stopped and looked at the other four princes, realizing what must be true, that these were the four winds, and everyone waited to see what these unpredictable gods would do. After a moment, they looked at each other and burst into laughter, and they all shook Princess Damayanti's hand and bowed low and said, "Oh, you were too clever for us." And they flew off away into the air. And Princess Damayanti and Prince Nal ruled the kingdom with kindness and wisdom, and it said that their kingdom always had the most pleasant and gentle cooling breezes.